In a world shrouded in political spin, few voices resonate like Noam Chomsky. A scholar, linguist, and activist, Chomsky challenges conventional narratives. His book, What Uncle Sam Really Wants, critiques U.S. foreign policy. Published in 1992, it exposes hidden motivations and consequences. Chomsky urges us to question official narratives and engage critically. It's a call to action for a more just world. To appreciate what Uncle Sam really wants, understand its context and the man behind it. Noam Chomsky, born in 1928, revolutionized linguistics and became a vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy. His work, What Uncle Sam Really Wants, critiques U.S. foreign policy and its global impact. Chomsky invites us to confront uncomfortable truths and demand better from our leaders. What Uncle Sam Really Wants serves as a stark reminder that foreign policy is rarely about altruism. Chomsky argues that beneath the veneer of humanitarian intervention and the promotion of democracy lies a more cynical reality. He posits that U.S. foreign policy is primarily driven by self-interest, namely the pursuit of economic and geopolitical dominance on the world stage. Chomsky meticulously dissects the historical narrative often presented to justify U.S. interventions abroad. He challenges the notion that the U.S. acts as a benevolent global police force, intervening only when necessary to protect freedom and democracy. Instead, he argues that these interventions are often motivated by a desire to secure access to resources, to maintain strategic advantage over rivals, and to suppress movements that threaten U.S. economic or political interests. The book delves into specific examples, from the overthrow of democratically elected governments in Latin America to the support of authoritarian regimes in the Middle East. Chomsky meticulously documents the human cost of these interventions, highlighting the suffering inflicted upon innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of geopolitical gamesmanship. Through these case studies, Chomsky reveals a consistent pattern of U.S. involvement in shaping the political landscape of other nations, often through covert operations, economic pressure, and military force. He argues that these actions are often justified through a carefully constructed narrative that portrays the U.S. as a reluctant superpower, forced to intervene to protect its interests and maintain global stability. To comprehend U.S. foreign policy, Chomsky argues, one must delve into history. He posits that American interventionism roots back to its expansionist zeal. The Monroe Doctrine proclaimed U.S. hegemony over the Western Hemisphere. Latin America became a testing ground for U.S. imperial ambition. Chomsky argues this pattern continued into the 20th century. From the Spanish-American War to Cold War interventions, U.S. sought global power. The rhetoric shifted to freedom and democracy, but motivations remained similar. After World War II, the US and Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, defining global relations. The US aimed to contain communism, leading to interventions worldwide. Chomsky argues these actions were more about maintaining US dominance. The Truman Doctrine marked a turning point, justifying interventions. From Korea to Latin America, US actions often led to instability and suffering. Chomsky suggests these patterns continue to shape the global landscape. What Uncle Sam Really Wants highlights the contrast between U.S. foreign policy rhetoric and reality. Chomsky argues that U.S. actions abroad often prioritize power over democracy and human rights. He points to U.S. support for authoritarian regimes and human rights abuses. The Vietnam War exemplifies this dissonance. Chomsky critiques the broader U.S. foreign policy framework. He argues it prioritizes U.S. interests over global needs, leading to inequality and conflict. Chomsky argues that the consequences of U.S. foreign policy extend far beyond the immediate impact on the countries targeted for intervention. He suggests that these actions have sown seeds of discord across the globe, fostering anti-American sentiment, fueling instability, and creating fertile ground for future conflict. One of the most significant consequences, Chomsky argues, has been the rise of anti-Americanism. He contends that the U.S. frequent interventions, often perceived as arrogant, self-serving, and disrespectful of national sovereignty, have generated widespread resentment and hostility towards the U.S. and its foreign policy. This resentment, he warns, can manifest in various ways, from popular protests and political movements to more extreme forms of anti-American violence. Furthermore, Chomsky argues that U.S. foreign policy has often contributed to instability in the regions where it intervenes. By propping up authoritarian regimes, supporting coups, and engaging in covert operations, Chomsky suggests that the U.S. has undermined democratic institutions, exacerbated existing tensions, and created power vacuums that are often filled by extremist groups or authoritarian forces. The Middle East, a region that has been the focus of intense U.S. intervention for decades, serves as a prime example of this dynamic. Chomsky argues that U.S. policies in the region, from its unwavering support for Israel to its invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, have fueled instability, exacerbated sectarian tensions, and created a breeding ground for extremist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Chomsky critiques U.S. foreign policy, arguing it hides behind humanitarian concerns and democracy promotion, masking true intentions of strategic self-interest and global dominance. He challenges the narrative of the U.S. as a reluctant superpower, suggesting interventions are calculated moves for American interests. Chomsky urges us to question the true motives behind U.S. foreign policy, often masked by rhetoric of liberation and human rights. While the United States government frequently justifies its foreign policy actions in terms of lofty ideals, Chomsky argues that economic interests often drive American foreign policy. He highlights the pursuit of resources, opening markets for corporations, and maintaining global economic order. This often trumps democracy and human rights. Chomsky's analysis challenges the notion that globalization benefits all. Chomsky argues that U.S. foreign policy success relies on shaping public opinion and manufacturing consent. He contends that the media acts as a conduit for government propaganda, legitimizing U.S. actions and demonizing opponents. The media, often beholden to corporate interests, tends to uncritically accept and reproduce the official narrative. This involves downplaying the human cost of U.S. interventions and exaggerating threats posed by adversaries. Chomsky suggests that this process is subtle, operating through story selection, framing, and language. The media often serves as an echo chamber for government propaganda, discouraging critical thinking. Chomsky highlights the importance of media literacy and skepticism towards information from those in power. He encourages seeking alternative sources and engaging in critical thinking about media's role in shaping public opinion. Section 4. Echoes of Guatemala, a case study in intervention. Chomsky delves into historical examples to expose the disconnect between U.S. rhetoric and reality. The 1954 CIA-orchestrated coup in Guatemala serves as a key example. Chomsky argues that the intervention was driven by economic interests, particularly the United Fruit Company. The democratically elected government of Jacobo Arbenz Guzman, which implemented land reforms, was targeted for overthrow. The US-backed coup replaced the government with a brutal military dictatorship. Thousands were killed, and the country was plunged into decades of civil war. Chomsky argues that Guatemala exemplifies the human cost of US interventionism. It serves as a reminder of the brutal reality behind the rhetoric of freedom and democracy. The case exposes the cynical calculations of power driving US foreign policy. Chomsky's analysis highlights the importance of questioning official narratives. He encourages critical thinking about the motives behind U.S. interventions. The Guatemala case underscores the need for accountability in foreign policy. It serves as a cautionary tale against sacrificing democracy and human rights for economic expediency. Section 5. The Price of Dissent, Silencing Opposition. Chomsky argues that the U.S. government shows a consistent pattern of intolerance towards dissent. Those who challenge U.S. foreign policy are often subjected to smear campaigns and surveillance. Chomsky himself has been a frequent target of such attacks. His criticism of U.S. foreign policy has made him a target of government surveillance and media smear campaigns. Despite these attacks, Chomsky remains a steadfast critic of U.S. foreign policy. He argues that it is crucial to speak truth to power, especially when governments engage in wrongdoing. Chomsky highlights the importance of protecting freedom of speech and the right to dissent. A healthy democracy depends on the ability to criticize the government and hold it accountable. Silencing dissenting voices erodes the foundations of a free society. It creates an environment of fear and self-censorship. Chomsky warns that we must be vigilant in defending the right to dissent. The clash of ideas is essential for a just and democratic society. Chomsky's analysis underscores the need to protect dissenting voices. He encourages individuals to challenge those in power and uphold democratic principles. Section 1. The Shadows of Uncle Sam. Intervention in Latin America. Latin America has borne the brunt of U.S. interventionism for over a century. Chomsky argues that the region has served as a testing ground for American imperial ambitions. The U.S. has repeatedly intervened to protect its economic interests and suppress movements for social justice. From the 1954 coup in Guatemala to the support for Pinochet in Chile, Chomsky paints a grim picture. These interventions were often justified as necessary to combat communism. In reality, they were about protecting American corporate interests. The consequences of these interventions have been devastating. U.S.-backed dictatorships were characterized by brutal repression and human rights abuses. Economic policies imposed by these regimes exacerbated poverty and inequality. Chomsky argues that the U.S. has consistently prioritized its own interests over democracy and human rights. The legacy of interventionism continues to hinder development in the region. It perpetuates cycles of poverty, violence, and political instability. Chomsky's analysis highlights the need for accountability in U.S. foreign policy. Section 2. The Middle Eastern Quagmire. Fueling the firestorm. The Middle East has been a focal point of U.S. foreign policy for decades. Chomsky argues that U.S. intervention in the region has had a profoundly destabilizing effect. The U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 is a prime example. The invasion was launched on the pretext of eliminating weapons of mass destruction. In reality, it was motivated by a desire to control Iraq's oil reserves. The consequences of the invasion were catastrophic. The war resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians. The power vacuum allowed for the rise of extremist groups like ISIS. Chomsky argues that the U.S. intervention in Iraq unleashed forces of chaos and extremism. The Iraq War serves as a warning against the perils of U.S. militarism. It highlights the dangers of pursuing foreign policy objectives based on flawed intelligence. Chomsky's analysis underscores the need to question the motives behind U.S. interventions. He encourages critical thinking about the human cost of intervention. The Iraq War serves as a cautionary tale against hubris and disregard for human lives. Section 3. The Indonesian Atrocities, a Case Study in Silence. Chomsky's critique extends to instances where the U.S. has turned a blind eye to atrocities. The Indonesian invasion of East Timor in 1975 serves as a chilling example. The U.S. provided tacit approval and material support for the invasion. The invasion resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of East Timorese civilians. The U.S. prioritized its geopolitical interests over the lives of the East Timorese people. The U.S. continued to provide military aid to Indonesia throughout the occupation. This support made the U.S. complicit in the suffering of the East Timorese people. The East Timor case exposes the hypocrisy at the heart of U.S. foreign policy. The rhetoric of human rights is often abandoned when it conflicts with strategic interests. The U.S. has often sacrificed its professed values for realpolitik. Chomsky's analysis highlights the need for accountability in U.S. foreign policy. The East Timor case serves as a reminder of the human cost of geopolitical calculations. Chomsky encourages critical thinking about the motives behind U.S. support for repressive regimes. Section 4. Echoes of Vietnam, a Legacy of Lies and Loss. The Vietnam War profoundly shaped Chomsky's worldview. Chomsky argues that Vietnam represents the quintessential example of American hubris. The U.S. intervention in Vietnam was driven by a desire to prevent a unified, independent Vietnam. The US feared that Vietnam would become a domino, leading to the spread of communism. The result was a protracted and bloody conflict that cost millions of lives. Chomsky argues that the Vietnam War holds important lessons for understanding US foreign policy. It highlights the dangers of imperial arrogance and flawed assumptions. The ghosts of Vietnam continue to haunt US foreign policy. The Vietnam War serves as a cautionary tale against interventionism. Chomsky's analysis underscores the need to question the pronouncements of those in power. He encourages critical thinking about the motives behind US interventions. The Vietnam War serves as a reminder of the human cost of clinging to flawed assumptions. Chomsky's critique highlights the importance of accountability in foreign policy. The Vietnam War serves as a warning against the perils of imperial overreach. Section 5. Beyond the battlefield, the economic weapon. Chomsky argues that U.S. foreign policy extends beyond military intervention. The U.S. utilizes economic tools to maintain dominance and shape the global order. Economic sanctions are a prime example of this economic warfare. The U.S. has repeatedly imposed crippling sanctions on countries deemed hostile. These sanctions often target civilian populations and cause widespread suffering. Chomsky argues that sanctions rarely achieve their stated objectives. They often exacerbate humanitarian crises and fuel resentment towards the U.S. international financial institutions, like the IMF and World Bank act as instruments of U.S. economic policy. They impose neoliberal economic reforms that benefit Western corporations. Chomsky's analysis challenges the notion of a level playing field in the global economy. The U.S. rigs the system in its favor, often at the expense of developing nations. Economic imperialism perpetuates a global order characterized by inequality and exploitation. Chomsky's critique highlights the need for accountability in U.S. economic policy. Section 1. The propaganda model, manufacturing consent. Chomsky's propaganda model explains how the media functions in a democratic society. Despite the absence of overt state censorship, the media serves as a propaganda system for elite interests. Media outlets are subject to structural and economic pressures that shape their coverage. These pressures result in a systematic bias in favor of powerful institutions. Chomsky identifies 5 filters that shape media coverage: ownership, advertising, sourcing, flack, and fear. Most major media outlets are owned by large corporations. Advertising plays a crucial role in funding media operations. Media outlets rely on government officials for information. Flack refers to negative responses from powerful interest groups. Fear has served as a powerful ideological filter, particularly during the Cold War. Chomsky's analysis highlights the need for media literacy and skepticism. He encourages critical thinking about the role of media in shaping public opinion. Section 2. Controlling the narrative media as a weapon. Chomsky argues that the media often serves as a powerful weapon in the hands of the state, shaping public perception of foreign policy issues. He points to historical examples like the Vietnam War, the U.S. invasion of Iraq, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Chomsky argues that the media manufactures consent for U.S. foreign policy by demonizing adversaries and downplaying civilian casualties. This control over the narrative is essential for maintaining public support for policies that might otherwise face opposition. Section 3. The illusion of objectivity, filtering the facts. Chomsky challenges journalistic objectivity, arguing it's an impossible ideal. Reporting is shaped by biases and worldviews. The act of selecting stories and sources involves subjective judgments, reflecting journalists' values and interests. Claims to objectivity mask biases, creating an illusion of neutrality. Chomsky calls for transparency and self-awareness in reporting, encouraging diversity of voices and viewpoints. Section 4. Dissent and its discontents, silencing critics. Chomsky argues that silencing dissent is crucial for manufacturing consent. The media, often with the government, discredits or ignores critics, limiting public debate. Ignoring dissenting voices, especially marginalized ones, keeps the dominant narrative unchallenged. Discrediting critics by questioning their motives or patriotism undermines their credibility. Chomsky warns that silencing dissent threatens democracy and creates an echo chamber. Section 5. The power of perception, shaping reality. Chomsky's analysis reveals that reality is constructed by the media, shaping our perceptions through selective coverage and framing. This subtle manipulation aligns worldviews with powerful interests, often against the majority's well-being. Chomsky emphasizes media literacy and critical thinking to deconstruct media messages and seek alternative perspectives. Understanding propaganda helps us break free and develop informed, critical views of the world. Section 1. Echoes of Dissent. Noam Chomsky's What Uncle Sam Really Wants critiques U.S. foreign policy, revealing interventionism driven by self-interest and global dominance. Chomsky exposes the human cost of power pursuits and the role of media in shaping public opinion. It's a call to action for critical reflection and challenging authority. Chomsky's work urges vigilance and speaking truth to power. Section 2. A Call to Awareness. Chomsky's work remains strikingly relevant, urging us to engage in critical analysis and media literacy. In an era of constant information, evaluating sources and seeking diverse perspectives is crucial. Chomsky highlights the power of civic engagement and collective action. By staying informed and supporting organizations, we can promote peace and justice. Chomsky's work is a call to awareness, urging us to challenge the status quo.